Greeting, dear listeners. Hope you're all doing well. We're back here today at the old Regina Cemetery, and more specifically, we're at Potter's Field. Now, if you don't know what the term Potter's Field means, saying somebody was buried in Potter's Field is the same as saying they were buried in a pauper's grave or a poor person's grave. It was the part of the cemetery, basically, where they buried people who couldn't afford a funeral and a tombstone. Here they buried the homeless, the John Does, the Jane Does, bodies that were never claimed, strangers, transients. And an interesting thing I found out, here in Regina, they also buried some of the men that were hanged here at the local jail, which really surprised me because where I grew up, they were always buried within the jail yard. But here they buried them in Potter's Field. I guess the idea of not having them not having a tombstone or a grave marker was considered a final punishment for their crimes. Although, while I was walking around the other day, I did find a grave marker that somebody had put down for one of these condemned men. And as soon as I can get back into the studio, I'm going to make a movie about the whole case, the trial and punishment of Harry Heupel. But no news on how soon I'm going to be able to get back into the studio. So you may be seeing me out of doors for a while yet. Now right here though, we have a brand new tombstone, a brand new monument, which was erected in 2017 by a number of history-minded individuals, groups, and organizations. And it's to commemorate the people that died here from the Spanish flu back in 1918 to 1920. And my good friend Kenton de Jong, who is a travel blogger and a photographer, was the person that spearheaded the whole project. So I'm going to leave a link in the description to Kenton de Jong's travel blog. You can check out some of his adventures. The dude goes to some very strange places. And I'm also going to leave a link in the description to a Wikipedia article on Potter's Fields, where the term comes from. It's quite an elaborate history that we can't get into right today. But before we leave the topic of Spanish flu, I did want to mention one fact. The Spanish flu killed 330 people here in Regina. That was 1% of the population in 1918. Thus far with COVID-19, we've had one poor soul lose his life out of a population of 200,000 people. So the COVID-19 has proved a lot less lethal than the Spanish flu, at least here. And I hope wherever you're watching this from, it's true for your hometown as well. But that's not why I came here. I didn't want to talk about Potter's Field, hangmen, Spanish flu, but I wanted to share the following email I got from a listener who works as a security guard in another city out here in Western Canada. So here is the security guard's tale. Warren, I worked a graveyard shift for a security company here. And I mean that literally, as one of my sites is the local cemetery. These COVID days are pretty strange. Well, you got that right, brother. These COVID days are pretty strange. This has always been a burg where people go to bed early. So the streets are pretty deserted during the wee small hours of the morning, particularly in winter. But nowadays, there's so little traffic. It's like being in a city of the dead. At the cemetery, we enter through the main gates and drive slowly around the grounds, looking for anything unusual, like kids partying or drunks sleeping it off. Even people having sex. Yes, it's true. Some people will do it in a graveyard at night. We had been receiving reports of a group of people being observed in the boneyard after dark. The cemetery is officially closed at 8 p.m., but there is no gate on the front entrance, so people could still come onto the grounds after hours. You might say the cemetery was run on the honor system. At the back of the lot is Potter's Field, where we are now, where they put the remains of those who died unknown, derelicts and strangers, some dead by violence, those whose bodies were never claimed. I was in the car, and as I reached it, I was shocked to see the ground covered with bodies. as if the dead had risen from their graves. I stopped and got out, but left the engine running. "Security!" I yelled, swinging my flashlight around to get a better look. They were butt naked, even though it was damn cold out, and they appeared to be dead, at least not moving. Now that's one of the unusual aspects of the whole night floater phenomena. Some members of the night floater cult will strip naked before entering the trance state where they can detach their heads from the trunks of their bodies. That's not true in every case, but you read that in a lot of reports, but it's usually in warmer weather. Be a little bit cold to be naked at night here now, but anyways, to get back to the guard's email, they were butt naked, even though it was damn cold out, and they appeared to be dead, at least not moving. And then I realized they didn't have any heads. Had I stumbled onto a mass murder? I turned to get back in the car so I could use the radio when these heads came out of nowhere and attacked. Maybe a dozen of them, men and women, with wide open mouths full of teeth, red eyes and wild hair. I was almost about to say wild eyes and red hair. No, red eyes and wild hair. They were trying to bite me and were spraying me with saliva, which was even worse, seeing we were in the midst of a flu pandemic. I guess they didn't hear the message about not talking moistly. Seeing we were in the midst of a flu pandemic. Luckily for me, I had left the door open and the engine running and peeled out of there. Not that I could drive fast on the narrow roads. But the heads kept following me. Really ugly, dirty-looking people. They were swirling around outside the windows, banging and spitting on them. And they followed me out through the main gate and chased me, even through the downtown, which was deserted. I finally lost them by driving across town and parking at the mall, which was brightly lit. I radioed for backup and the other guard, and I returned to the cemetery. But of course there was no one and nothing there. And the other guard and I returned to the cemetery. But of course there was no one and nothing there. They think I'm nuts at work, and I was starting to think so myself. But then I came across your channel and realized they must have been the night floaters. Name withheld by request. Well, I emailed the guard back and I wrote in part, I suspect the night floaters rule the streets after dark, so the sooner we're out of quarantine and force them to hide, the better. So yeah, remember, they're out there. Close your windows at night, shut your drapes, and then you might enjoy pleasant dreams. So, dear listeners, stay safe, stay subscribed. If you're new to the channel, this is your first visit, please consider subscribing. I'm not able to get into my usual YouTube studio right now because of the pandemic. It's in a building under lockdown, but there are 120 other videos on my site. So please check out some of my earlier videos, including the playlist, The Night Floaters Explain, which will give you some insights into the whole night floaters phenomena. And as well, stay hungry. And now I'm going to ask my faithful one-person camera crew to give us a panoramic view of Potter's Field. Not that there's a lot of tombstones to see, but take it away, crew. Stay hungry. Cheers.